Okay, so the study that we're using is a book by James A. Harnish. I've turned it on. Am I on? Okay. So now I'm a little hot, I think. A little. Okay, so when by James A. Harnish, and it's called When God Comes Down. And it's really a cool book. So I might get another copy to put in the library. I put this one in, but, I highlight as I go through, and you don't want to see my highlights. So what this is essentially about, the theme is essentially about, is incarnation. And incarnation, what I like to say is incarnation is making the incomprehensible comprehensible. There is so much that transcends our experience and our knowledge about God. God is transcended above all that we know or can know. So how do we have that relationship with God? And what the writer points out, and what I really found a lot of power in, is that we can't do it by ourselves. We don't even know where to start. But God makes a decision, or is part of God, actually part of the essence of God, to make God's self known to us in a way that we can understand. And that's the nature of incarnation, is God coming down to our understanding. Of course, when we say God comes down, we're thinking of God in the heavens, but what I like to think is that God comes down in a way of making it more simple and more understandable for us. And how Harnish introduces this book, it was really in a cool way. He talked about Robert Owens Evans. And there was nothing in his life, most of the time, terribly remarkable about Robert Owens Evans. He was a minister, and he had spent his life in ministry, which was remarkable enough itself, I guess. But what made him a little bit interesting was he was a stargazer. And he learned about supernova, what supernovas are. I don't know when he was born, but he was ordained. He retired from ministry in 1998. So he's relatively current. But he discovered what a supernova was. Do you know what a supernova is? Anybody? Yeah. It's when a star, a giant star, not just a simple star, but a giant star, an incomprehensible distance from Earth, blows up. And they say that a supernova creates a light that is equal to 100 billion of our suns, which is an extraordinary amount of light. But it is millions and millions of years away, light years away. So after it travels millions and millions of years, it appears in our sky as a little twinkling in the dark. Not what we see as the stars. It's something different. And Evans became so enraptured by that he spent his life training himself and searching to discover supernovas in the sky, of seeing supernovas. So he was literally a stargazer. He spent all his spare time at night looking for supernovas. And he found about 40 of them. And he had an interesting quote that Harnish used. And there's something satisfying, I think, about the idea of light traveling for millions of years through space, and just at the right moment, as it reaches Earth, someone looks at the right bit of sky and sees it. It just seems right that such an event of that magnitude should be witnessed. The thing is about supernova is that most of us miss it. I've probably never seen one in my life. First of all, a lot of our population may not even know what a supernova is or how to look for it. And also, we are so busy in our lives that we miss them. But you think of that moment of something traveling through space for millions and millions of years, and then just for a moment, it's a twinkle in the sky, in our sky. So easily missed. But 100 billion, the lights of 100 billion suns being missed in a second? One, it tells us how simply incomprehensible our universe is. How vast, how wondrous it is. But it also talks about, and what the theme is, it talks about the nature of incarnation. Because it tells us that we so often miss what God is showing us. Because God doesn't do it the normal way. And we have to be prepared for it, and we have to train ourselves to catch the incarnation, to see it in a world that is too always busy distracting us, right? I just thought that was fascinating. So we start with the usual cast of characters. So we start with Zechariah. And Elizabeth. And what do we know about them? We know that Elizabeth is an older cousin of Mary, much older, because in the story, both Zechariah and Elizabeth are in advanced years, right? Well past the time of bearing children. And that Elizabeth, and that they had no children, that Elizabeth was barren. At least that's what the scriptures tell us. Now we know that the cause of a couple not having children isn't always the woman's fault. But back then, in biblical times, if a woman could not have children, she was barren. There's no other reason. It was the woman's fault. So, was she barren? Well, the scriptures say so, so we're going to go along with that. In the days of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly order of Abijah. His wife was a descendant of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both of them were righteous before God, living blamelessly according to all the commandments and regulations of the Lord. But they had no children because Elizabeth was barren, and both were getting on in years. Once, when serving as a priest before God, and his section was on duty, he was chosen by lot according to the custom of the priesthood to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and offer incense. Now, at the time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of the people was praying outside. Then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John. You will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He must never drink wine or strong drink. Even before his birth, he will be filled with the Holy Spirit. He will turn many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. With the spirit of power of Elijah, he will go before him to turn the hearts of parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Zechariah said to the angel, "How will I know that this is so? For I am an old man, and my wife is getting on in years." The angel replied, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. But now, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time, you will become mute, unable to speak until the day these things occur." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondered at his delay in the sanctuary. When he did come out, he could not speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the sanctuary. He kept motioning to them and remained unable to speak. When his time of service was ended, he went to his home. After those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she remained in seclusion. She said, "This is what the Lord has done for me when he looked favorably on me and took away the disgrace I have endured among my people." I'm going to read another passage. This comes from Isaiah 64, 1 through 3. "Oh, that you would tear open the heavens and come down, so that the mountains would quake at your presence, as when fire kindles brushwood and the fire causes water to boil, to make your name known to your adversaries, so that the nations might tremble at your presence. When you did awesome deeds that we did not expect, you came down, the mountains quaked at your presence." Have you ever felt that way, where there was something that frustrated you or seemed overwhelming, and you just wanted God to say, you almost prayed to God, just come down and shake things up? shake people's heads, change people. I know I've been feeling a lot of that in the last number of months, but where you just want God to come down in full glory and just change everything. Right? Have you ever felt that way? That isn't the way God works, is it? God is more subtle. God is a light that travels millions of years and appears in the darkness. Right? God is a couple in their old age who had given up a hope of ever having children, finally bearing children, even though they initially didn't believe it. Now, in the story, Zechariah is in the presence of a messenger from God, the angel Gabriel. But even with that presence, that hopelessness was still there. Zechariah didn't know if he could believe it. How can this be? I'm old. My wife, he was being very diplomatic, is getting on in years. This can't happen. Something simple, something magical. But most of the ways that God comes down are not noticed. So how did Zechariah and Elizabeth notice it other than an angel coming? They also were prepared for it because they had spent a life in discipline. What was that discipline? Well, Zechariah was a priest, so he was trained in prayer, in worship, scriptures, tradition, and Elizabeth, the wife of a priest, just like a minister's wife, was trained in all this as well. How many ministers' wives probably know as much as the minister but don't get any credit for it? So they had a life of discipline. They were training, like Robert Owens Evans, they were training their whole life for that moment. That moment where God comes down, where God makes God's self real. They were training themselves to recognize the incarnation when it happens. They were ready for it. This is what Advent means. Advent is a season of preparation. It's a time where we prepare ourselves to recognize incarnation. It isn't just when we retell the stories just for fun because they're nice stories and it makes for a nice candlelight service. We read the stories, we go through the season to remind ourselves that we have to stay alert, we have to stay focused, we have to keep on the look for ways that God comes down even now to reveal God's self to us. In the small things, in the things that so often can be overlooked, but when seen have tremendous meaning and power to us. So, we have in the Christmas story Zechariah and Elizabeth. After a life of prayer, worship, study of scriptures, tradition of being righteous and faithful and disciplined, of experiencing the incarnation, not just by witnessing the birth of the Christ child, but having their own child who is going to prepare the way for that child. And the shepherds, who are simple people in the fields, holding the faith inside of them, witness angels coming down. Because along with discipline, there's also silence. When we take the time to quiet our mind, quiet our lives enough to be able to see or to hear what God has to say or show us. And the wise men, spending their life in astrology and studying the stars and their meaning, see a bright light. What do you think it was they saw? Perhaps a supernova? Because they were looking for it. Because they were reducing the distractions in their life so that they could see it. This is what Advent is. It means accepting the discipline, like in Lent, of being in study, putting our focus on God, and also being silent to prepare our way, prepare the way for us to see what God has to tell us. The title of this book comes from a specific hymn by Charles Wesley, and I tried to find the hymn in the hymn books, and I found Canticles called it, but it's a hymn, and it's meant to be a carol. Glory be to God on high. But this is a stanza that has meaning. Glory be to God on high, and peace on earth descend. Now God comes down. He bows the sky and shows himself our friend. God the invisible appears. God the blessed, the great I am. He sojourns in this vale of tears, and Jesus is his name. When we talk about the transcendence of God, we're talking about the incomprehensibility of God, the vastness, the greatness of God, how God is beyond our understanding. And one of the ways that God is beyond our understanding is God as love. We can understand what love means in a certain way, but understanding God and love in the greater sense, to the way that God understands. We need help. And the messages of the book is that we can't get to that comprehension of God by ourselves. We can't initiate it. There are things that are beyond our control. Zechariah and Elizabeth did not have control themselves over where they were going to have a child. The nation of Israel did not have control of whether or not they were conquered by Rome and lived under bondage, captive of Rome. There are things that are beyond our control. And we can't change it by ourselves. So God comes down, God comes in the midst of us to show us the way. As John says in the beginning of John's Gospel, there was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. Before that, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it. God is sending a light. God sent a light. God came to us. And even all the distractions of the world, even all the things in the world that cause many people to miss it, still can be seen by certain witnesses. Pay attention. Who look for the supernova in the spare time. Who find the moments of ministry that's in the midst of us every day. That sees the living Christ in faces that a lot of times people overlook. That's the promise of Christmas. That's the promise of Advent. We stay alert. We look for the light that's been traveling millions and millions and millions of years so that we can be a witness. And God can come down. Any questions? Comments? Things that make you go, huh? This is less a study and more of another sermon, I'm afraid. But you're still free to respond. Rich, I know you're just aching to say something. Microphone.
It reminds me of the hymn, I love to tell the story for those who know it best. Because I've been in church, mostly on pushing 60 years. And it still amazes me what I don't know. I mean, you go through life, you go, yes, I'm a Christian, and no, that's not right, and this and that, and this and that. And then when you dig into it, it's amazing. It still amazes me how deep this can go. I mean, it's kind of like childbirth. A child knows more about his surroundings the instant before he's born. And then he knows nothing. It's truly amazing.
Well, when we think about ourselves in a humbling experience, is we use only 10% of our brain? Somebody who even uses 25% of their brain would have powers and knowledge that we wouldn't even be able to understand. So there's so much out there that is beyond us. I remember there was a Bible study led by, now he's a licensed pastor at my church, the church I served in California, but he started leading a Bible study, and he broke us up in groups, and I was just, I told him I wanted to attend the Bible study, but I wanted him to lead it, and I just wanted to be another person in there. And we broke up in groups, and there was somebody at the Bible study, young woman, and she was in my small group, and I think she was just visiting for the first time, so I don't know if she even was aware of my position in the church. But well, I like coming to Bible study because, I read the Bible study, and it's just so simple to understand. The Bible's just so simple. I know what it says. I go, really? Okay. And I said, so those ministers that spend years in biblical studies, she says, you don't have to do that. It's just so simple. And I go, okay. There's so much we can learn. There's so much we can discover. And God, and the story of the scriptures is not that God is holding this back because God is protective of God's own knowledge. God is holding back so that we're not overwhelmed. And you see that time and time again through the scriptures. Most notable time is at Mount Sinai in Exodus, where Moses goes up to the mountain and Moses says, "Can I see you?" And God says, "If I show myself to you in my full glory, it will strike you dead. So tell you what, hide yourself in this cleft of a rock, and I will pass by, and you can see the end of my train, and you can experience." And the scripture says that for weeks following, Moses' face shone. It was just that glimpse of the tail end of God passing by caused him to glow. To me, that is just wonderful. That's the magic of faith. Karl Rahner, one of my favorite theologians, Catholic theologians, and he says, he described in Foundations of Faith, the nature of God is in this, is ultimate, absolute mystery. And rather than that being a scary thing, that becomes an inviting thing, because we get to spend our whole life and actually all eternity asking the question that is God and delving into the mystery and falling in love with the mystery and falling deeper and deeper in love with God. And what's our key in unraveling that mystery, the little bit that we can over a lifetime? Jesus. Jesus becomes the key. Because Jesus is the ultimate of God's incarnation, of God coming down. That's what we profess. That's what we worship. That's what we witness. The more we find out about Jesus, the more we delve into Jesus, the more that we commit our lives to Jesus, the further into the mystery and the magic and the knowledge of God we go. Anybody else? Okay. Next week we will look at Joseph, and it has a very interesting title. I don't know if you noticed the title, but the chapter is titled Joseph, Faithful Obedience to the Undressed God.